The young and the restless spoilers the ties that bind. Sharon and Faith's shared nightmare. The Newman family was no stranger to chaos, but the photo Nick Newman received that fateful afternoon sent shockwaves through his already fragile composure. Sharon, the woman he had spent years loving, losing, and protecting, was shackled to a rusted pipe in what appeared to be a sewer. Her expression, pale and hollow, screamed of despair and exhaustion. Whoever had sent the photo wanted him to feel the weight of her suffering, and it worked. Nick's fist clenched as he paced the room, his mind racing. "We need to find her," he barked, his voice cracking. "Whoever did this, Cameron, or someone else, they're going to pay." His daughter, Faith, had been silently watching the scene unfold, her hands trembling as she stared at the photo. It wasn't just the image of her mother in chains that unsettled her, it was the setting. Something about the location tugged at the dark recesses of her memory, pulling her back to a time she had tried desperately to forget. "Dad," Faith's voice was small, hesitant. "I think I've seen that place before." Nick stopped pacing and turned to her, his brows furrowing. "What do you mean? Where?" Faith swallowed hard, her throat dry as the memories came rushing back. "It looks exactly like the place Cameron took me," she whispered. "When he kidnapped me." Faith's trauma resurfaces, the room fell silent. The mention of Cameron Kirsten's name was like a ghost creeping into the present. Though Cameron had been declared dead, his shadow loomed large over their lives. For Faith, those memories of captivity were a living nightmare, moments she had spent years trying to bury. Nick's anger flared. "Cameron's dead, Faith. He can't be behind this." "But what if someone else is?" Faith pressed, her voice shaking. "What if whoever did this knows what Cameron did? That place, it looks exactly the same. I can't forget it." Her admission hit Nick like a freight train. He realized that Faith's memory might be the key to finding Sharon, but it also meant dragging his daughter through the trauma she had fought so hard to move past. "Do you remember where it is?" he asked gently, trying to mask his desperation. Faith shook her head, tears pooling in her eyes. I don't know. Everything was so confusing. I was so scared. I just remember running and running." Her words trailed off as she cradled her head in her hands, the weight of the moment threatening to crush her. The race against time. Nick knew he couldn't afford to wait. Every second spent searching blindly was another second Sharon was left in that hellhole. Fueled by a combination of rage and fear, he decided to head out, hoping against hope that he could find something, anything, that would lead him to Sharon. "I'll go back to where we found you," Nick said to Faith. "Maybe there's something there we missed." Faith wanted to protest, to tell her father that it was pointless, but the guilt of knowing her mother's life hung in the balance silenced her. She stayed behind, her mind racing with fragmented memories of her escape from Cameron. Meanwhile, Nick tore through the streets of Genoa City, retracing old paths and visiting long-abandoned locations tied to Cameron. But it was futile. The passage of time and the weight of his own emotions clouded his judgment. Cameron's supposed death had already erased many of the physical ties to his crimes, leaving Nick to grasp at shadows. The missing puzzle piece back at the Newman Ranch, Faith sat in silence, staring at the photo again. The more she studied it, the more pieces of her memory began to fall into place. The rusted pipe, the jagged concrete walls, the faint trickle of water in the background, it all felt too familiar. Then, suddenly, it hit her. The sound of footsteps echoing through the tunnel, the faint smell of mildew mixed with oil, the graffiti she had glimpsed as she fled. "It's near the old industrial park," Faith blurted out, startling herself with the clarity of the realization. Grabbing her phone, she dialed her father. "Dad, I think I know where it is," she said, her voice urgent. "The industrial park on the south side. There's an old storm drain near the loading docks. I remember running through there." Nick didn't hesitate. "I'm on my way." The ghost of Cameron Nick arrived at the location Faith described, his flashlight cutting through the darkness of the storm drain. His heart pounded as he moved deeper into the labyrinth of tunnels, the sound of water dripping echoing eerily around him. When he finally found Sharon, chained and exhausted but alive, relief washed over him. "Sharon," he called out, rushing to her side. She looked up, her face pale and drawn, and whispered, "Nick." As he freed her from the chains, Sharon clung to him, her body trembling. "He's still here," she muttered. "Cameron. He's watching." Nick stiffened. "Sharon, Cameron's dead. This is someone else." But Sharon shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. "No. It's him. I've seen him." Faith arrived moments later, and when she saw her mother, she burst into tears. But as they prepared to leave, a faint laugh echoed through the tunnels. Nick froze, his blood running cold. Was it just his imagination? Or had Sharon been right all along? A frustrating mystery. The Newman family's ordeal ended that night, but the questions lingered. If Cameron was truly dead, then who had orchestrated Sharon's kidnapping? And why had they chosen a location so eerily similar to Faith's past trauma? The photo, the setting, the laugh, it all pointed to someone intimately familiar with their darkest moments. The narrative left Nick and Faith grappling with uncertainty, their frustration mirrored by the viewers. Had the writer made a fatal error in logic, or was this a deliberate ploy to keep the mystery alive? Why had the plot chosen to intertwine Sharon and Faith's stories so cruelly, trapping them in a shared nightmare? For now, the answers eluded them. But one thing was certain, the shadows of Cameron Kirsten's legacy were far from gone, and the Newman family's battle against his ghost, whether real or imagined, was far from over. This development leaves the door open for further exploration, allowing the story to weave between psychological tension, unresolved trauma, and the lingering impact of a villain long thought dead. Would you like to dive deeper into Sharon and Faith's shared journey, or explore the identity of the new antagonist? The search for Sharon, Faith, Mariah, and Nick sat in tense silence, the photo of Sharon shackled in the abandoned sewer spread across the table. It was grainy and eerie, but enough to give them a starting point. Nick traced his finger across the map, pointing to the area where the sewer systems overlapped with the city's older industrial zones. "It's somewhere here," he said firmly. "The angle of the pipes, the rust, and the faint graffiti in the background, it all matches this part of town." Faith nodded, though her face was pale. "It's just like the place Cameron took me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't want to remember, but it's the same." Mariah placed a comforting hand on Faith's shoulder. "We'll find her," she said, her voice steadier than her nerves. "We'll bring Sharon home." Nick stood, his determination palpable. "We don't have time to waste. I'll go ahead. You two stay here and monitor the location. If anything happens, call me." Before Faith or Mariah could protest, Nick was already out the door, his jaw clenched and his mind racing. He couldn't let anything happen to Sharon, not again. A nightmarish discovery. The industrial zone was desolate, the air thick with the smell of rust and decay. Nick's flashlight pierced the darkness as he navigated the labyrinthine tunnels. His heart pounded with every step, his mind flashing back to all the times Sharon had been caught in danger because of his inability to protect her. Finally, he saw her. Sharon was slumped against a rusted pipe, her wrists bound by chains. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow, but she was alive. "Sharon!" Nick called out, rushing to her side. She stirred at the sound of his voice, her lips parting in a faint whisper. "Nick," she managed, her voice weak but unmistakable. "You found me." Nick's hands worked quickly to break her chains, his anger and relief blending into a potent mix. He didn't care who had done this, Cameron or someone else. He only cared that Sharon was safe now. But as they made their way out of the tunnels, something strange happened. Sharon kept glancing over her shoulder, her body tense. "He's still here," she murmured. "Cameron, he's watching." Nick shook his head. "Sharon, Cameron's dead. This is someone else's doing." But Sharon's fear was palpable, and Nick couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. A fractured memory. When Nick returned Sharon to safety, Mariah and Faith were overcome with relief. But as they bombarded Nick with questions, His responses left them baffled. What happened? Faith asked. Did you see anyone there? Nick rubbed his temple, his brow furrowed. I don't remember, he admitted, his voice tinged with frustration. I remember finding Sharon, but after that, it's all a blur. Mariah exchanged a worried glance with Faith. You don't remember how you got her out? Or what you saw? Nick shook his head. No. It's like something's blocking it. I just know I got her out. Faith's face darkened. It's Cameron, she said firmly. He's doing this to you, Dad. He's alive, and he's messing with us. Mariah frowned. Cameron's dead. There's no way he's behind this. Maybe someone else is using his methods to throw us off. But Faith wasn't convinced. The sewer, the setup, it was too similar to her own kidnapping to be a coincidence. It's him, she insisted. I don't care what anyone says. The shadow of Cameron as Sharon recovered, she became more insistent that Cameron was alive. I saw him, she told Nick one night, her voice trembling. When I was in that sewer, I saw him. He was standing there, watching me. Nick wanted to believe her, but his rational mind pushed back. Cameron Kirsten was dead. They had seen the proof. So why did every piece of this puzzle seem to point back to him? Meanwhile, Faith grew more agitated. The memories of her own ordeal resurfaced with every passing day, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this was all part of some twisted game. He's not done with us, she told Mariah. He's making us relive it, piece by piece. But then a startling revelation came to light. A local homeless woman, Jordan, was seen near the industrial zone on the night of Sharon's rescue. When questioned, she admitted to knowing about the sewer. It's just a place I found, she said nonchalantly. Nobody goes there, so I figured it was safe. Nick's frustration boiled over. Are you saying you're the one who put Sharon there? He demanded. Jordan shrugged. I don't know anything about your Sharon. I've never seen her before. But that sewer's just an old place I use sometimes. Maybe someone else found it. Her explanation left more questions than answers. If Jordan hadn't kidnapped Sharon, who had? And why would they choose a location so deeply tied to Cameron's crimes? The writer's hand, the story's twists and turns left both the characters and the audience reeling. The uncanny resemblance between Sharon and Faith's experiences seemed too deliberate, almost as if the writer was orchestrating their torment for dramatic effect. Was this a narrative oversight, or a calculated decision to keep Cameron's ghost haunting their lives? Nick's memory loss only added to the frustration. Was it a coincidence, or had someone tampered with his mind? The ambiguity surrounding Jordan's involvement further muddied the waters, leaving everyone questioning her true role in the events. In the end, Sharon and Faith's shared trauma became a reflection of the writer's intent, to explore how the past can haunt the present, how fear can cloud judgment, and how unresolved stories leave scars that never fully heal. But the question remained, was Cameron really dead? Or had the writer deliberately left the door open for his return, a specter lurking just out of reach? As the family grappled with their unanswered questions, one thing was clear: this chapter of their lives was far from over. This version retains the tension and mystery while weaving in the frustration of unresolved answers. It sets up potential future developments while keeping the story emotionally grounded. Let me know if you'd like any further expansions.